Hi, I'm going to do a little demonstration of cutting the neck block tail here for the dovetail joint on the acoustic guitar. And basically my procedure has evolved over time. I just do it with a handsaw, but I have some specialty tools and a little bit of a personal method that I've come up with. So many times I'll make a laminated neck like this, depending on what type of lumber I have. You've got a nice center line to work off of when you're doing various operations on the neck. So that's very nice. Basically, when you do the lamination, the first thing you need to do is plane this down very flat and then really join it true. I use a piece of sandpaper on the table of my table saw, so I have a nice joining surface there. Then I take this over to my miter saw, my crosscut saw, and then cut this at an angle of about 2 degrees. I'm ultimately going to end up with about 1.5 as the neck angle on the guitar, but it always comes in too shallow, so just through experience I set it to 2 degrees and make sure that this is all perfectly square. I've also squared these sides to this, and checked it and everything, so everything is square. And then I chop this at a 2 degree angle and clean everything up nice and flat and square here on the blank. Now, I've already marked this here with my marking gauge. I just scribe it in here. And then I have this specialty tool which I've constructed out of rosewood and plexiglass. And it gets very confusing because you want when you're doing it on a one-off, when you're marking it, because you're going to mark the tail and the pin, and you have to account for the thickness of the top and then the fact that it sits up an 1/8 inch more. So I've done all those calculations so many times, and I finally said, what if I could just make a gauge? And basically what this is this has one dovetail for the block and then a larger one for the neck. These are skewed at a 2 degree angle, and then they also sit on a tapered thing here, which allows me to mark how I'm going to cut the actual taper of the dovetail. So I know that's a lot to absorb, but I'll show you kind of how it works. I've already got my center line marked on here because of the material that I've chosen. And then I go ahead and, put this on here, middle all the way down, and I can also kind of make sure it's square, because this is a homemade tool, but I square it on my scribed line there. And then I scribe the pin here, make sure I stay stiff. And mark the angle of the tail right on this gauge. And then again I get the depth here. So once I've done that, I take my pencil just so I can see it better and just go inside those scribed lines. Okay, so that should work pretty good. So then I take this and stick it in the vise. Take my saw getting ready to need sharpening, but it's still sharp enough to cut. And I put it right in the incised line. Carefully start my cut here. Would like it to be a little sharper. Okay. Now this is the tricky part that always gets messed up. Is sawing these tenon cheeks off. Okay, and there you can see when you cut it like that, you got to be real careful cutting those tenon cheeks off, because that's always the place where you end up having to do too much correction at next set. But you can get a perfectly clean dovetail neck joint that way, and I prefer it because the way I build, all the jigging and the noise and dust and everything from a router bit, it's certainly not worth it, and myself I don't get as good of results with it. So there you go.